Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance. In this resistance video, sponsored by contribution from Carolyn, and here is her story. Thank you for your blunt, no-nonsense approach to these wretched pieces of shit. You can use every single specific fact in my letter, except my last name. This is so fucked up. I'm 59 years old. As you see, I am an attorney, and I am the scapegoat child that could never do anything right. And I looked up Carolyn's profile. She is an attorney. She has done major cases. She's been in the paper. This is somebody who has no reason whatsoever to have any confidence issues whatsoever. Up until this morning, I am an attorney. I am the scapegoat child that could never do anything right up until this morning. But thanks to your videos, I didn't realize that my father, Jay, was just as much of a narcissistic piece of shit as my mother, Lael. My mother, Lael, is. This rhymes with pale. Lael. L-A-E-L. That's a weird name. My parents live in La Jolla, and my dad has earned about $15 to $20 million over his lifetime. Both he and my mother grew up during the Depression. My brother is the golden child. He is 53 years old and is very successful and has his own construction management firm. I have not been as financially successful as my brother, but then again, I didn't have nearly the help. If you're making excuses for being an attorney, I mean, is this where your family's got you at, Carolyn? That you were basically making excuses that you're an attorney? That you try cases? That you've been in the newspaper? That you've been quoted in the newspaper? I saw. Unbelievable. Oh, by the way, you're right about the hate crime thing. My parents built my brother a 10,000 square foot, $5 million home overlooking the ocean. Why? Why would he build that? If he's a construction manager, why would his parents have to build him anything? He obviously is a golden child. My parents built my brother a 10,000 square foot, $5 million home overlooking the ocean. About 20 years ago, we were both in rehab at the same time. I got out and stayed sober, and I just heard on the streets that the golden child just got out of residential rehab a few months ago, probably for cocaine. Not from my family, mind you, but from someone else. But if it was me, you can bet it would have been on the 10 o'clock news. Secrets and lies. I confronted my father about the secrets, and he got all defensive and started yelling at me. That's how he operates. He attacks when I complain about narcissistic abuse. Right, it's the same thing my father does to me. When you corner the narcissist, they get nasty. They get cornered. And you know you're over the target. Okay, when they get nasty, you're over the target. You know you're over the target. Because they go from 0 to 100 like that. It's like a switch and the rage monster comes out. About 15 years ago, my parents deeded my brother 7 rental units at the beach that bring in about $20,000 a month in income. I found out about it 3 years later when I was doing a title search on my own property. It made me sick. Secrets and lies. My dad paid off my mortgage this year, but it was only $320,000. Big fucking deal. I asked my father about his estate plan because I am estranged from my brother. Wonder why. And I didn't trust him. My father told me all I was getting was half the life insurance policy. This was an insurance policy that was originally purchased just to pay the estate taxes. So my brother gets the entire estate plus half the estimated tax liability. I get half the estimated tax liability. It makes me sick. What is ever more fucked up is that I wasn't supposed to find out that I wasn't getting any of the estate until after he was dead. What kind of sick parent does this to their child? Leaves them nothing. Fuck you. They left you worse than nothing. See, $320,000 is a lot of money to pay off your mortgage. But here's the problem. Like, when you accept anything from these people, they own you. And then they can rationalize in their head any reason why they can fuck you over. Now, being that you live in the most expensive, over the cliff state in the country doesn't help matters either. He left you worse than nothing. That's why when you're dealing with these people, okay, and you're a lawyer, so you should know, even though this isn't your area of law, estate law, will law is not your area of law. You should know, how these will disputes end up. Okay? It's usually the lawyers sucking up the money, okay? And you're going to end up the same thing you were going in with. Nothing. So, your question is, where do you cut your losses at this point? Recently, I tried to explain to my father how fucked up my mom was to me while I was growing up, and he just kept telling me, why do you keep bringing up the past? We've been hearing that a lot lately. About a month ago, after he told me that I wasn't getting a single thing from their estate, I didn't speak to him for 2.5 weeks. When he called, he tried to gaslight me by asking, why are you mad? Because he's trying to bait you. Then, a couple days later, my dad said that he thought about what I had said about my mother and that he was sorry. But he wasn't, because he didn't do anything to make it right. I realized he liked torturing me every bit as much as my mother did. He sits over her like a nervous bird, watching her every move. The last time I was over there was like a Fellini movie. She had this huge hematoma on the side of her head, and the entire side of her face was bruised, obviously from falling down. Yet, she refused to use the electric scooter. I watched her fall face first into the bed and not be able to move because she was falling again. It was such insanity that she was so fucking vain that she wouldn't use the chair. She is 88 and a half and in poor health. He is 87 and a half. I wish both of them would drop dead today. They are horrible, awful people, but you'd never know that from the outside looking in. I suppose I'm grateful that at least my aunt, my father's sister, sees the narcissistic abuse of my parents. And look, their vanity never dies. Their vanity never goes away. Virginia was strutting around in front of my Aunt Ginny, who's dead now, who died 4 days after my mother, of cancer as well, I believe. When she had breast cancer 20 years ago, Virginia at 80 years old is like strutting in front of her because she lost 10 pounds and wanted Ginny to notice at 80 years old. Like, this is how they think. Especially the Depression era narcissists, the ones who went through the Depression. Oof. Most of the people who went through the Depression, learned from it. And that's why they overspoiled the baby boomer generation. But some of them, they took, like my grandmother, they absorbed it and they used it and they saw all that weakness and all that suffering and all that hurting as something that they could use to their advantage. My parents were big social climbers. They both got off on reading their names in the society column and having lavish parties. Here's how manipulative my mother was. She cozied up to the man who wrote the society column and charmed him. He was a frustrated designer, so he started creating hats for my mother to wear to these galas. Ugh, God, a hat wearing. Ugh. You notice? The bigger the narcissist, the bigger the hat, like whether it be in religion or real life. It's like just these giant fucking ridiculous hats, whether it's the Pope or these women at galas or derbies or whatever the fuck they're doing. And I love hats. So then the narcissistic society rioter could write about how great his own hats were on the Narcissistic Society matron, and it was just their little secret. It also helps that my mother is beautiful. Our house is always perfect, and we had a full-time live-in maid. Even though we lived in the biggest house on the block, once I got a job at 14 years old, my mother never bought me clothes again. She was always stingy as hell when I wanted something, because she saw you as competition, Carolyn. Even with all that money and all that lifestyle and all of it, your mother saw you as competition. Your mother saw you as competition. And your father probably saw you as competition to your mother. Your father enjoyed the entire scenario, working the strings like a sick little marionette covert that he is. And probably growing up, you thought your mother was the only problem, was all your mother. But no. Now you realize with your father's behavior at 87 and a half. Oh, you've been pulling the strings the whole time, motherfucker. Here's the point, and for everybody, like, this narcissism, this abuse, this cluster B abuse, it knows no economic status, it knows no race, color, gender. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. She was always stingy as hell when I wanted something. She would always get it just a little bit off, even though she knew better, just to fuck with me. About 15 years ago, my mother threw a bunch of money at an international organization and bought my brother a position as the Norwegian diplomatic consulate. My brother's whole life has been co-opted by my mother, including picking out his wife for him when he was 12 years old when we were traveling to Norway. Oh, he's a son husband too. So probably the wife is no threat to your mother. My mother was very, very charming, and people think she's so kind, but she's as cold, but she's as fucking cold as an assassin. I never saw any warmth in those green reptilian eyes. She's also very smart and educated, so when I was younger, she was a formidable foe. Now I don't give a fuck about her. I never want to see her sorry ass until it's room temperature. I fantasize about strangling her with my bare hands as I look into her eyes and watch life slip away. Jeez, no lawyer? It's odd that, not even odd, it is noteworthy you become an attorney. You become a lawyer. You become a criminal defense lawyer, where you're in court presenting your case. You're arguing for your defendant. You're arguing for your client. You're arguing against the state. You're trying to convince a jury. You're trying to convince a judge. You're up against the other attorneys. Yet the courtroom you'll never win in is this one. Don't think the fact that you're an attorney is lost on your parents. My brother is just as much of a narcissist as my mother, but he lacks any of her social graces, so he doesn't circulate among those people as easily as she did. He has no friends. He is married, but his wife is always traveling and has 2 boys. One boy is away at college at UC Davis, and I think he has Asperger's. The younger one is a senior in high school, but doesn't want to do anything except play video games. His good friend was McSkillet, the YouTuber who committed suicide in a McLaren by driving into oncoming traffic at 100 miles an hour during rush hour in San Diego. Never heard of him. My brother will never be able to stay sober because he can't reconcile that the rest of the world doesn't think he's as wonderful as his mommy does. My brother also just had some publicity about some gay porn, and that made me think about the video about the borderline men. I only heard that one this morning, so that was kind of a super unusual intersection. Not really. Like, most of these guys are bisexual or closeted homosexual. and he had publicity about gay porn. My upbringing, although lavish, was utterly horrible. My mother never touched me or was affectionate with me, and I knew that she hated me from the moment I had an awareness of self. I started reading when I was 2, and I am much more intelligent than both of my parents or the golden child. My entire life, my mother has just been phoning it in. I was a competitive ice skater and played violin. The 2 things my mother did. How sick is that? I could never do either one of them to her satisfaction. Once my brother was born, she was just going through the motions. When she made my skating costumes, she used the ugliest fabric she could find because she saw you as competition. You were never going to reach her standard in anything she ever did. Because if you did, then you'd be better than her. And you can never be better than the narcissist. Never. You can never be better than the narcissist. They won't allow it. You're not allowed to be better than them. And once your brother was born, she had the son husband she always wanted. And that's what happens to these son husbands. They get turned into bisexual, emotional women in men's bodies with impulse control issues, drug and alcohol issues, anger issues, and sexuality issues. That's your brother. That's your brother. And it's because of your mommy. Because he's been married to your mommy long before his Norwegian wife ever came into the picture. It was so strange to know that your mother was always fucking you over. Whenever I broke up with a boyfriend, they became her new BFF, eating dinner over there and watching football on Sundays. It was sickening. Another one. Another mother hanging out with the daughter's boyfriend. Competition. You're just competition. And your father was loving all of it. Your father was loving all of it. Because the more his wife competes with you, the less he has to deal with her bullshit himself. My mother didn't speak to me for 12 years. So for the last 12 years, I've been on the outs for the holidays. I realized that was the best thing that ever happened to me. While she wasn't talking to me, my dad was playing both sides of the fence, as they always do. So, in other words, I was still visiting with him about once a week, but she and I were not speaking, and there's your mistake. You can't go no contact with one and not the other. All of them have to go. They all have to go. Otherwise, you're going to get guys like your father. Otherwise, you're going to get guys like your father who play both sides of the fence. The covert narcissist plays both sides of the fence. And then by the time you finally figure out he's a covert narcissist, he's in his 80s. And now you got 59 years of your life to reassess. She recently apologized. I'm sure it was a half-assed apology. I'm sure, because they always are. They always are. She recently apologized, and that was all utter bullshit and only undertaken because my father was going in for surgery. My mother was so she lost your father. She was going to need you to take care of her. My mother was about as emotional as if she were telling the houseboy to take out the garbage. I was so fucking stupid. I was crying, but that was 10 months ago. I am not crying now. See, when my mom apologized to me, I recorded it because she always lies about what she says. And as I listened to it over and over again, my mother said, I thought about what I have done for the past 7 to 8 years. 12, but who's counting? 7 to 8 years, what about your childhood? What about your childhood? Come on, counselor. Come on, counselor. You got to cross-examine this bitch. I knew it was hurtful, and now I'm sorry. I was like, what the fuck? You deliberately knew you were hurting me, and you did it anyway. Here's how you should have been approaching this. You need to approach this as a lawyer at all times, which is how I started approaching my father, as an interrogator. I put myself, the last times I were dealing with them, as the role of my job as the interrogator, and I saw them nothing more as the thief lying to me. If you watch them and you put her in the mind frame of somebody you're cross-examining on the stand, it falls apart. You got to put your lawyer hat on. I knew it was hurtful, and now I'm sorry. I was like, what the fuck? You deliberately knew you were hurting me, and you did it anyway. That's not enough. Yeah, exactly. It's like a half-assed allocution. I talk about allocution on this channel all the time. Unless the narcissist stands there and gives full allocution, it's meaningless. You know better than anyone, and I explain this on my channel all the time. When somebody's going to plead guilty and they have to allocute into open court, why do they do that? So the family has closure. So they can't be gaslighted later. I didn't really do it. It was, I said it just because, to get the deal. No, they make you stand there and tell exactly what you do and how you did it. That is so the victim has closure. An apology without allocution is meaningless. See, don't need a mom like that. That took me 10 months to process that. And this is after years and years of therapy and knowing on an academic level my mother is a narcissist according to the DSM-5. She, of course, like my father, did nothing to make it better. The true hallmark of a narc apology is not lifting a finger to make it right. They're just supposed to utter the 5 talismanic letters, sorry, bullshit. Well, of course, it was all out in the open that my mom knew she was being hurtful by not speaking to me, and she went ahead and did it anyway. And my father was obviously okay with it. He would protest to other family members that he just wanted the family to be together again, when all they really wanted was to excise me out of the family the whole time. That's all they wanted, to excise you out of the family your whole life. Fuck the last 12 years, Carolyn. What about the last 59? Like, whoa, we are starting way down the timeline here. Let's back it up, back it up, back it up, back it up. So while I've been gone for the past 12 years, they've had their perfect family with my brother, the golden child, and his perfect wife, who clearly took my place. It is why my brother, who has all the money in the world and success and privilege, can't seem to stay sober at age 53. Right, because his wife was picked out, not really to be his wife, to be the replacement you. And someone who would never, ever challenge your mother's status in the family. Your mother saw you as a threat, as did your father. You don't think they see your law degree as a threat, Carolyn? Of course they do. Like, you're explaining yourself, and you are a successful criminal defense attorney. You've been quoted in the LA Times and other papers. You've been involved in major cases. So the fact that you are trying to justify your life here is a lesson for everybody, how destructive these people are. That this trained criminal defense attorney who battles it out in court, okay, takes 12 years, took 10 months for her to see through her mother's lies. Someone else who's trained in interrogation and cross-examination. So you consider what chance the layman has in this, the average person who doesn't have this type of training. Who didn't grow up with the wealth that Carolyn grew up with. Or even me to that certain extent, because I didn't grow up poor by any stretch. I didn't have servants or anything like that. But you can still be deprived you could still be deprived and even grow up in wealth. And it's a hard thing for somebody who grew up poor to understand, but it happens. Because these monsters are all the same. They're the same person. Whether it's Carolyn the who grew up in privilege in California and is a criminal defense attorney, or someone like Noma in New Orleans, whose black mother was fighting in the street and fighting in the streets of New Orleans, black woman on black woman, sister on sister every day. Nola's mother and Carolyn's mother are the same woman. Same motivations. Same thing drives them. And he's supposed to be starting a multi-million-dollar job in a few months. And his sorry ass ends up in residential rehab? Really? What's even better is that they all tried to keep the secret from me, except I found out anyway. Because unlike the rest of my family, I have a conscience and try to do the right thing, and sometimes get rewarded with that juicy little nuggets like that. Because they know you're better than them, Carolyn. That's why they're hiding it from you. They're hiding all evidence of their crimes from the lawyer. They're terrified of you, to be quite honest. I mean, that's what this reads to me. They're terrified of you doing exactly what I think you're doing, what you're doing now by writing into me. Of you exposing them. Of you turning on your skills against them for once. You know what? That's one fucked up family and I don't need to be any part of it. Have a good time leaving your drug-addicted son all your millions, asshole. Well, I'm a quick study. I finally realized after watching your videos this morning that my father, far from being a benign enabler, was also a full-fledged fucking narcissist himself, which is exactly why he thought it was okay that I didn't find out that I was going to inherit anything until after he was dead. He was actually pissed off that I asked him that, and he had to look me in the face and tell me. My grandmother was a total cunt to my mother. We lived next door to my grandmother for 7 years. My mom always used to park me over there when I was little, and my grandmother was like Hitler. But the good thing is she taught me to read with phonics, and I think it's totally helped me my entire life. But I'm not sure if it was worth the cost of generations of narcs. I didn't have kids because I was afraid I would be a mother like my mom. My grandmother was such a cunt, she got divorced in the 1940s, and my grandfather moved to Alaska to get the fuck as far away from her as possible. My grandfather used to call my mother every day and rag on my mom for about 45 minutes, and sometimes my mom would start crying, but I never saw her cry after I was about 4 years old. In fact, she's a heartless sociopath without a conscience. As you can probably tell, my parents have been together a long time, 68 years. I was just talking about this with my husband, who is my ride or die, and I said my parents were so intertwined, they were like some giant narc biomass. So even if I wasn't having contact with my mother, she was still reaching out her tentacles through my piece of shit dad. My piece of shit dad who thinks it's okay to leave me nothing, to not a stick of silverware, and thinks it's okay I don't find out about it until he's gone. But he's doing that to please your mother. You gotta understand that. He's doing that to please his mother, to please your mother, because it's all part of his covert game. Do you understand? Because as long as he's keeping your mother happy by abusing you, his life is easier. He doesn't have to deal with her bullshit. I realized that my mother only apologized to me so she can reel me back in to torture me some more by not giving me any of her hundreds of thousands of dollars of jewelry or the family silver. My last husband was also a narcissist and a cop, which equals sociopath. He and my mom would have a great time always talking shit about me, both behind my back and to my face, because he's a cop. So, because he's a cop, he has cop aggression. And much like a lawyer, he knows how to banter back and forth. So your mother liked him because he could probably keep you on your fucking toes. That's why your mother liked him. My entire life has been one big cognitive dissonance. From the time I was very little, I knew my mother hated me. The hardest part of my life has been trying to reconcile what I felt viscerally with all the bullshit coming out of the mouths of my family members. To this day, my brother thinks my mother is the victim of me. My dad made an oblique reference to making things right the last time we spoke, but I realize after watching all your videos that is just an illusion and a way to keep hoovering me back in. Right. Look. They're an 88 and a half and 87 and a half. They know they're going to die soon. They're going to need somebody to take care of them. It ain't going to be your cokehead brother. They always try the Hoover when they're about to die, when one of them's about to die. Now that both of them are old, who else are the two evil narcs going to get their supply from? The domestic help. Because I realize with a great degree of finality that I am done. My father couldn't have done anything more hurtful than not leaving me any family heirlooms. And I realize that is because my mother gets off on denying me things and deliberately hurting me. Yes, that's what I do. Yes. It is the internal carrot on the stick, but you can never get to the carrot. Exactly. The carrot. Exactly. The carrot on the stick. I have talked about that over and over and over again. The more she hurts me, the more it pleases her. And the more it pleases her, the more it pleases my dad. Because he's a pussy whip bitch. Right. That's what I've been telling you about. I'm glad you realized this already. No matter what I did, whatever my academic achievements were, I graduated from UCSD with a degree in biochemistry, and then I went to law school. They were never good enough. My mother refused to come to my college graduation, but my father, the covert narc, came. Of course, my mother, even when she wasn't speaking to me, didn't have any problem telling people about her daughter, the attorney. My poor husband has been watching me get sucked back in for the past year, and then all the pain before that when they were ostracizing me. What the fuck? Who fucking does that to family members? Fuck that family. But your straightforward, no bullshit approach finally got through to my thick head that the only way to deal with these fucked up people is truly no contact. How am I supposed to feel after my dad tells me he isn't leaving me anything except half the life insurance policy that was originally purchased to pay the taxes on the estate? Nope, can't be around them ever again. Never, never, never. Call me when they're in the ground so I can come and take a big steaming shit on their grave. Thank you for all your work. I'm a firm believer in getting the word out about narcissism because for the longest time I didn't know what the fuck was wrong with my family or me. I always thought it was me. Well, thank God that Al Gore invented the internet because one day I searched never good enough and up popped the very famous characteristics of narcissistic mothers, and I was like, holy crap, that's my mother exactly. And that's how it happens for most of us. We look something up on the internet, like for me, it was actually Charlene. Well, for me, it was my Aunt Ginny, the one who died 4 days after my mother, was on WebMD and printed out histrionic personality disorder and handed it to my mother and said, read this. My mother didn't get it. I read it, and I'm like, this is Virginia. And as I read it deeper, I'm like, wait a minute. Not only is this Virginia, this is my mother. And that's where it all started. And then Charlene, a couple years later, was on this, Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. And from there, You know, that's where it's like, once you get the lingo down, once you understand, once you could put verbiage and verbalize what has been happening, it all falls into place. Once you understand what gaslighting is, it all falls into place. Once you understand what a flying monkey is, and a covert and an overt, and how it all works, and once you hear other people's story, your story being told, coming out of other people's mouths in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world, the things that you couldn't even explain or put into words, you're hearing it come out of someone else's mouth when you thought you were alone. And not only is it you and this person have the same story, half the people in the comments are like, holy shit, the same thing. And also, this happened to me. That happened to me too. Holy shit, these people aren't even unique. It wasn't until I completely digested the horror of her admission that she thought about what she was doing and being deliberately hurtful to me, and went ahead and did it anyway, that I finally realized she was without a conscience, because most mothers don't do things deliberately to hurt their children. I will close for now, but I'm still processing what must be the end of it, because it has got to be the end. I cannot go back there, or else I will end up like my golden child brother in rehab, but I would never give them that satisfaction. All these times I keep crawling back to my dad, but he's just as much of a piece of shit as your mother is, because he gets off on it. Throughout the years, he would throw me a few morsels, but nothing significant at all. But he paid for my nephews to go to school at La Jolla Country Day at a cost of about $20,000 a year for each of them. And now it looks like one of them isn't even going to college, and his wonderful sonny boy is a drug addict. One other thing that I take a lot of comfort in is just how bad it must have been around my brother's house for the past few years of him, for him to end up in residential rehab right before he's starting this big job, because he's been working on for 5 years. A big job that he never would have gotten without my parents' connections. I'm laughing out loud at that shit. No wonder the younger kid is traumatized. My brother will end up ODing on cocaine, hopefully soon. It's quite amazing that my family is so very textbook, but I guess that's what we have a DSM-5 or DSM-6, because you begin to recognize patterns of dysfunctional behavior across the spectrum of society. And even though I have tried to make a bargain with the devil in maintaining contact with my father, I realize that my relationship with him is simply a one-way street with no reciprocity. The bummer is that children are at an emotional disadvantage because we are hardwired to love our parents. Otherwise, we never would have survived as a species. But I cannot love a person who delights in deliberately hurting me, and that's what I realize my role in this family is, to be the trash can and to be blamed for everything. My brother tried to blame his relapse on me because I was emotionally abusive. Right, pussy. Right. More gaslighting. You can use everything in this but my last name. I don't care if you use their first names. In fact, I think it would be great. And go ahead and say it's La Jolla. Why do I give a fuck? I don't. Based on our family patterns, I predict my father will try to make contact with me within the next week. This time it must be different. I cannot be around them ever again, and it's futile to try to explain to them why their actions and conduct are so hurtful, because they make it seem like I'm crazy. My father said that I am being ungrateful because I was only getting half of the life insurance policy, always gaslighting me. Thank you for all the work you do. I can't tell you how valuable it's been for me just to listen to your videos. Even if the facts aren't necessarily exactly the same as mine, many of the fundamental assumptions and behaviors are the same. And sometimes therapy doesn't always validate your observations because the therapist doesn't have an opportunity to observe the narc. Mostly for me, therapists find it hard to believe that mothers hate their children, but they are statistically significant number that do. I'll shut up and listen now, Carolyn. Well, You're right. The only thing you can do at this point is cut all contact. Because listen, you got to expect for them to cut you out of the life insurance as well. Okay, you can, and I've done so many will stories on this channel. You're never gonna get it. You're never gonna get it. They're gonna use it against you for the rest of your life. That's just what they do. That's just what they do, Carolyn. So, my suggestion to you would be cut all contact with all of them. Change your phone numbers, block them off social media, and ghost them. And move on with your life. You're 59 years old. Okay? You don't need this shit. You've made a successful life for yourself. Okay? You've done just fine without the maids and the up until now. You don't need their nonsense. They're just going to suck you back in. And why they're going to try to suck you back in? Because one of them's going to die. One of them's going to die. So one of them's going to want to be taken care of. And then they're going to want to hoover you back in. And you're going to go and then put the other one in the grave. And then find out you got absolutely nothing. They will use you to the grave. They will use you to the grave. Your mother has hated you. Your mother's been competing with you your entire life. And your father has been pulling the strings. Why? Because he's a cuck. Because he's a pussy. That's why. Because it gives him peace. Gives him an easier life. So he sacrificed his daughter to his hole of a wife. Awful. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your contribution and your story, Carolyn. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance.